And I can know that no matter what I have done, who I am, what I think, how wrong I've been, God will graciously receive me. I don't have to worry about judgment from God. Our new life, this restored life that God has for us, actually begins when we begin to trust and desire the life God intends for us. Now, I know we've got the trust thing, right? We know that it's impossible to please God without faith. So we understand that I've got to believe this, and we try to make ourselves believe this. But I want you to get what he says here very clearly. He said, set your hearts, this is verse 1, set your hearts on things above. We always start with what do I have to do and leave out what God's inviting us to desire. I've been thinking a lot about this week. I was thinking about how do we fall in love? Right? How did Michelle fall in love with me all those years ago? I don't know why that's funny. She did fall in love with me. And I basically think there's three things. I want to see what you think about this, because I don't have any research to kind of prove this. Now, here's what I think. The underlying thing is that there was a need, right? She had a need, or we had a need for relationship. We were built for that. So underlying that was this need. But I want you to get these three things that I think are critical to beginning to fall in love. And I think it's going to be critical to us understanding how to be conformed and transformed. Here's the first thing. I think there is a need for curiosity. Michelle and I met at a party. We didn't know each other at all. And we began to be introduced to each other. And in that, we began to be curious about the other person. Like, I'd like to know more about this person. I'd like to spend more time with this person. That's why I think if you think about Jesus and the way that he taught, which frustrated the disciples, right? Why did Jesus teach the way he taught? He would teach in parables. He would tell them stories. Why did he do that? Because Jesus knew one of the best things he could do was stir up spiritual curiosity. One of the things that we have done in the church is that instead of stirring up spiritual curiosity towards Jesus, is we have tried to give Jesus all served to them hot and ready, but they weren't necessarily even hungry. But people want and need to have their spiritual curiosity stirred up. And so we stir up curiosity. And I want to know more. Jesus taught in such a way to see who was curious. Not everybody was curious. And some people was like, okay, Jesus was just like, that's okay. I'm going to teach to these multitudes. I'm going to perform miracles. And anyone who's spiritually curious, I'm going to invite them to come and know more. So I think curiosity is one of the first steps of falling in love. And so we can't set our hearts on the things above if I'm not spiritually curious about who God is and what his kingdom might look like and what it would mean for me. It's got to start with some sense of curiosity. And I've got to begin to give into that curiosity and ask questions. Second thing is, I think there's got to be a sense of graciousness. If when Michelle and I had first gone out on a date, I can still remember our first date, if we had gone out on the first date, and one of the things that Michelle and I were recently, had both of us, without knowing each other, we had recently committed our lives to Christ in a really full way. We had grown up in the church in some ways, but I had a prodigal season, she had not, but she had really come to know Jesus personally, and I had come out of my prodigal season, and I was like, God, I'm all yours. And so one of the things, but we were very immature, and one of the things that we were very interested in, we didn't know this, of course, but I wanted to know, is this woman a woman who knows Jesus? And she wanted to know, is this guy a guy who knows Jesus? So there was a curiosity there, and we were trying to figure out, without knowing how to do this well on the first date, nobody had trained us in this, we were trying to figure out how to raise that. And we knew we didn't want them to just say, well, yeah, I go to church. It was like, yeah, but people go to church and don't know Jesus. So I want to know, do you know the Lord? And we were asking each other questions about that. But imagine if at some point I had been the opposite of gracious toward Michelle. I had been, like, let's say that she begins to say, I've really begun to explore a life with Jesus. And I would have said something like this. Well, that's just for idiots and fools. Probably wouldn't have had a second date. Now, I want you to get this piece of graciousness, because graciousness, at the heart of hearts that we all have, is I want to be known and I want to be loved. And if I get the sense that being known by you will be judged by you, it's going to be hard for me to let myself be known. So now I'm curious about this woman, but she's also gracious towards me. So I'm beginning to feel like I can be known by her, because she's now going to receive me and accept me. So if we don't have a spiritual curiosity and we don't feel like God will be gracious to us, we're going to close down. We're going to close the door. But if we have a sense, which is why Jesus so often preached grace, he came full of grace and truth. He wanted us to know that God is here to forgive us and wants to welcome us. And so this graciousness tells us that I can begin to think, I can begin to set my heart in a curiosity about who this God is, and I can know that no matter what I have done, who I am, what I think, how wrong I've been, God will graciously receive me. I don't have to worry about judgment from God. The third piece of this is that I think there is a sense in which I need to know, and this is the way it worked with Michelle and I. Third date, we're on our way up to, we had just graduated from the University of Maryland. She's on her way to grad school, and she's asked me to come. She has to find an apartment up there, and she said, would you come? This is a third date. I don't remember our second date. Must not have been that great. But anyway, third date, I remember. Third date, we're on our way up 95, going to Baltimore to look for an apartment, and she's driving. I'm in her car, and she says to me on the way up something like this. I want you to know I really like you. And if you don't feel that same way, I want you to tell me now, so that I can let you out on the side of the road. I mean, what? Like that's ungodly pressure, don't you think? What is a guy going to say? Have no interest in you. I thought maybe we'd have lunch. Just drop me off right here. I'll just walk on home. But here's what she was doing, right? And it helped both of us. She was saying, I know this feels a little risky, but I want to know, are you for me? Are you interested? And we do that in a lot of different ways. It's that fun thing of flirting. So here's what we want to know with God. In order to fall in love, in order to set my heart on things above, I have to begin to be spiritually curious. What would my life look like? What would this be? What is God really? Who is God? What does heaven look like? What does restored look like? All of those things. I've got to begin to be curious. And then I've got to have this idea that God will be gracious toward me when I bring my messy self to him. And then I've got to know, is he for me or against me? And once I've got these three things, that my curiosity is drawing me toward him, my sense that he's going to be gracious back toward me is there, I'll be accepted by him, and that he is actually for me, he wants to bless my life, then I can begin to let my love flow. But here's what I want you to get clear. You can't move forward in any effective way without beginning to set your heart on things above. When you begin to set your heart on things above, the rest of what we're going to talk about is going to flow. The problem is many of us have tried to do the other. We've tried to begin to set in our lives what we see in verse 3. We've begun to say, well, I've got to put to death these things. Maybe then I'll be acceptable to God. I've got to put to death what belongs to my earthly nature, blah, 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 blah. So we try to work for something that we don't actually desire. You ever done that? That's frustrating. If I keep trying to do something that I don't desire, then I'm going to be constantly at odds within my own life. And now, the Bible does describe this, right? The Bible does say that we, as we've been born again, we have two natures. that I still have this sinful nature that I am invited to begin to lose love for, and I have this new nature, this new relationship with the God of the universe that God says, hey, set your heart there. Don't set your heart on these things anymore. Set your heart here. If I will set my heart on the things above, then the third thing that we want to talk about, it's really the second thing that Jesus, or that Paul says here, is that I need to then set my mind on it. Now, can I just tell you, I'm just giving you all of our dating history. I asked Michelle out on, we met at a party on Thursday, April 29th. I remember it. On Saturday, I called her. She didn't know I was going to do this, but I called her for our first date on that Saturday. I got her phone number on Thursday. When I called her house, her younger brother answered the phone, Paul. And I said, is Michelle there? And he said, no, she's not here. Is this Kevin? Ooh. I said, as a matter of fact, it is. And he said, well, I have strict instructions that if you were to call, that I have to go get her. She's down the street. Is that not right? I'm not lying to these people. Now, here's what I want you to get, is that Michelle had already, from Thursday to Saturday, set her heart on me, and now she's set her mind on me. She's like, if this guy, I'm lining out my life, you know. If he calls, Paul, I'm going to go out. I can't sit by the phone forever. I'm going to go down the street. But if this guy calls, you ask who it is. If it's Kevin, what if it had been somebody else? We don't even want to go there. I never thought about that. If it's Kevin, come get me. If it's Joe, I don't know. Here's the thing. You begin, this is what, I want you to get this. This is natural. You and I, once I set my heart on something, my mind goes there. Right? It's not, here's what I'm trying to differentiate. Religion tries to force this from the outside in. Jesus invites this to be a love affair from the inside out. My life has been changed in so many amazing ways because of my love affair with Michelle. But it wasn't outside in, it was in. It was, oh my gosh, I love this girl. I love spending time with her. And so my heart was there, and then my mind was there, and then I began to say, these are things I'm not going to do anymore because my heart is here. And these are the things I am going to do because my heart and mind are here. Does that make sense? Doesn't that? But if you try to do it the other way, if you begin to conform your life toward this idea of setting aside the things of this earth when you don't desire the things of heaven, you're going to be in a place of frustration and failure. So God is just giving us the recipe here. He's saying, look, set your heart on me. How can you set your heart on God when you can't see him or touch him or feel him in the same way that you can a person? Well, first of all, we go back and we look at the story of who God is. We begin to develop an idea of his character. That's why reading the scripture is so important, because by reading the scripture, I've been reading the Bible, except for this year, because of our journal, I'm reading only the Gospels. But for the last 10 or so years, I've been reading the whole of scripture, because God's giving me a picture of who he is through history, because it's easier to fall in love with him that way. It's not that every day that I read, I got something that I was supposed to do. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I didn't understand it. But as I would keep reading it over and over again, the God of the universe began to be real to me. Who he was, how he acted, what he thought, how he cared for people. And I began to say, wow, this is an amazing God. And as his promises would come out and his faithfulness would come out, it was easier to begin to fall in love with him. And the more I fell in love with him, the more I would set my heart on him. And my heart would be then directing my mind to think about him. Do you see how this works? And then Paul says at the very end, this is what Paul says, now that your mind, and by the way, remember that, I love this song, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Think about this. This is what it says, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face. And the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace.